Hi everyone, and welcome to The Sleepy Scientist. I'm really happy you're here. Tonight, we're going to go on a calm and quiet trip to learn something amazing. So get comfy, take a deep breath, and let's enjoy this peaceful science story together. Before we start, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it for you right now? If you like relaxing science videos, don't forget to tap the like button. Now let's begin.
Beneath your feet, far below the roots of the grass and the hush of shifting soil, there lies a quiet deeper than sleep. It is not the silence of stillness, but a hush born of waiting, a waiting that has lasted longer than any memory. Somewhere down there, folded inside the earth like a secret, are the bones of giants. Dinosaurs, once breathing, blinking, singing through jungles and swamps, now lie as whispers pressed into stone. They do not speak in voices, but in fragments, ribs like crescent moons, claws curved like falling leaves, a vertebra cradled in sandstone as if the rock had held it like a hand. These bones are not dead. They are not alive. They exist in between, paused in time, paused in story. They carry the weight of thunder and sun, of migration and stillness. Once they ran, they fell. They were buried not by accident, but by the long choreography of earth and erosion, of mudslides and floods, of volcanoes and ash. The world wrapped them slowly in layers, like lullabies in sediment, singing them to sleep through epochs. And now we bend down, brush back the dust, and listen. Fossils are more than bones. They are time printed into texture, memory made mineral. They are what happens when the soft parts of life vanish and the hardest parts, bone, shell, tooth, cling to form, like the last note of a lullaby floating on air. Over millions of years, water seeps through the buried remains, carrying minerals that slowly, quietly replace the living tissue. The result is not just a replica, but a translation, life, rewritten in stone. And just like a whisper, it's only heard if you get close enough to care. Now imagine a tiny rib, no longer than your finger, hidden in a wall of ancient shale. A paleontologist kneels, fingers moving like wind over pages, brushing the rock not with force, but with patience. Each touch is like a question. Is this bone or shadow? Is this the start of a story? The fossil does not answer loudly. It resists with silence. But under the right eyes, with soft light and stillness, it begins to reveal itself. A curve here, a texture there, a pattern that is not chance, but design. And so begins the repair, not of the dinosaur, but of the story. Some fossils are so complete they feel like dreams, skeletons curled as if they were still sleeping. Others are fragments, a single claw or tooth, but even these can ripple through time, drawing whole creatures into view. From a hip bone, you can guess how it walked. From a jaw, how it fed. And from the softness around the fossil, the clay, the pollen, the silt, you can tell the kind of world it once knew. Fossils do not just tell you what lived, they tell you how it lived, where it walked, what it breathed, and how it fell asleep into stone. Dinosaurs once filled the sky with cries, the ground with tremors, the rivers with their long shadows. Now, they fill drawers and museums, notebooks and databases. But this is not their end. It is a continuation. To hold a fossil is to hold a moment that was never meant to be held. It is to catch something that escaped time, like dew caught in the fold of a leaf. And when we reconstruct these bones, when we reassemble them from splinters and dust, we are not just rebuilding bodies. We are giving voice to the silent ones, to the bones that have been whispering all along. Some of the most delicate fossils are found in places you wouldn't expect. A print of soft skin, the echo of feathers, even the suggestion of color. Yes, color. Scientists now believe some dinosaurs were not just brown and gray, but wore brilliant shades, iridescent blues, fiery oranges, stripes and speckles that shimmered under prehistoric sun. And all of this hidden in stone. The fossil becomes a lullaby not just of structure, but of light, movement, song. There are places on Earth where time collects itself, like a breath held too long. The Gobi Desert, the Badlands of Montana, the chalk cliffs of Argentina. Here, the bones lie shallow and deep, resting under the thinnest blankets of dust. Wind uncovers them slowly, rains pull them closer to the surface. And when we find them, we are not just finding what was, we are meeting what remains. We brush away not just dirt, but distance. We are not gods resurrecting the past. We are children picking up fallen stars. Sometimes we find fossils locked in poses that break your heart. A dinosaur curled in a death sleep, two locked in combat, a mother still sheltering her eggs. These scenes are not dramatic for drama's sake. They are poetry set in geology. They remind us that even in extinction, there is tenderness. There is a kind of grace in being found. And there is still so much we do not know. Every new fossil is not a final answer, it's a doorway. A mystery wrapped in calcium and time. How did this one move? Why did it die here? What did it hear, smell, fear? Some scientists believe dinosaurs sang to one another, low vibrations carried through the ground like elephants do today. Others believe they danced, displayed, gathered in herds under moonlight. The stone does not confirm or deny. It simply waits for us to listen better. So next time you touch a rock, remember, it may be holding something older than mountains, softer than memory. Something that once walked, once lived, once vanished into time with no farewell. And yet, it left behind this whisper, this fossil lullaby, not to be loud, just to be held. Now imagine the world those bones once belonged to, not in ruins or relics, but alive. A place where ferns reached like feathered hands into golden light, where dragonflies the size of hawks shimmered above still ponds, and the air trembled with the steps of creatures whose hearts beat like soft drums beneath thick skin. This was not a world that knew it would be remembered. It lived day by day, leaf by leaf, storm by storm. And yet, it left behind a kind of memory, not in diaries or words, but in the bones and soil, in footprints pressed like punctuation marks into the earth's oldest sentences. Those footprints, like fossils, speak softly. They show where weight shifted, where toes curled, where a tail dragged. From the distance between prints, we learn how fast it moved. From their shape, how the foot was built. But more than measurements, they offer something deeper, a moment of presence. A single step taken and held in place by accident, now a permanent echo. And when we follow those echoes, we are not chasing creatures. We are following the path of time itself. Scientists call this field ichnology, the study of trace fossils, the imprints of behavior, not bones. A resting spot where the belly of a dinosaur touched sand, a nest ringed with broken eggshells, a trail of bite marks on the bones of another. These are not just signs of life. They are the fossilized shadows of moments, of hunger, of rest, of birth, of death. To study them is to hear a soft sound from a world long asleep. In some cases, the rock preserves more than movement. It holds the impression of skin. Not the skin itself, of course, but its texture, its wrinkles, the way it folded or cracked. One fossil shows the scales of a hadrosaur, so perfectly arranged it looks like a mosaic laid by time. Another captures the softness around a snout, suggesting lips or maybe cheeks. And each detail adds to the story, not just of what dinosaurs were, but of how they might have felt, how they experienced their own bodies, their own worlds. And within these stories, the repair begins. The kind of repair that is not about fixing bones, but about reconnecting them to meaning. When paleontologists work, they do not just extract fossils, they reconstruct lifeways. They take shattered fragments and search for patterns. They ask gentle questions. Was this creature warm-blooded? Did it care for its young? Did it mourn its dead? Some of these questions may never have answers, but they shape how we look. They shape how we care. Consider the gentle art of fossil cleaning. A fossil arrives at the lab caked in stone, part of a larger rock. The tools are tiny, dental picks, soft brushes, air scribes that hiss like whispers. Technicians sit for hours, weeks, even months, peeling back time like old wallpaper. Every flake removed is a choice. Every pause is respect. Too much force, and the fossil vanishes. Too little, and it stays buried. This is not science in a hurry. It is science as meditation. And then comes reconstruction, the puzzle work, the matching of ends, the guessing of curves, the search for symmetry. Sometimes bones are missing. Sometimes they never fossilized. And so, scientists use comparisons. This femur matches that of a cousin species. This skull shape fits a known lineage. They build models, digital scans, careful mounts. Not to fake what isn't there, but to imagine what could have been. The fossil is not just cleaned, it is restored into being. In this work, there is a strange tenderness. Imagine holding a tooth that last beat into something 90 million years ago, or running your finger along a rib that once moved with breath. These are not trophies. They are reminders. The world has held life in shapes and colors we can barely imagine. And even though those lives ended, they left us something beautiful. A record, a rhythm, a root. And as more fossils are found, the story grows stranger and softer. We once imagined all dinosaurs as leathery giants, roaring through swamps. But now, we find evidence of downy feathers, of small eyes perfect for night, of hollow bones built for speed or flight. Some fossils show quills arranged like fans. Others suggest tail plumes used not for defense, but for display. And we begin to realize the ancient world was not just fierce. It was beautiful. Some dinosaurs sang without voices. Scientists studying the inner ear bones and vocal structures believe that certain species may have made low-frequency sounds, rumbles that traveled through ground or water, felt more than heard. Others, like modern birds, might have used visual cues, a shimmering crest, a bobbing dance. These were not beasts of violence, but creatures of subtlety. And the fossils are the lullabies they left behind, etched in bone and dust. There is also the question of color, not just in feathers, but in mood. Certain pigments fossilize under rare conditions. Tiny structures called melanosomes, which help determine color in feathers, have been found preserved in amber and shale. From their shape, we infer hues: rust red, glossy black, smoky gray. And suddenly, the fossil becomes less of a ruin and more of a painting. We begin to see not just what it was, but what it looked like on a sunny morning 120 million years ago. Some of the most moving fossils are found by accident. A construction site turns up a leg bone. A hiker stumbles across a vertebra after a storm. In these moments, time interrupts itself, and the repair continues, not of fossils, but of wonder. We are reminded that the past is not locked away. It is always just beneath our shoes. And then, there are the fossils that remain unfound. So many lives vanished without a trace, bones melted by weather, scattered by scavengers, buried too deep for light. These are the stories we'll never fully recover. But even in their absence, they speak. They remind us that history is full of soft erasures, that not everything lasting is meant to be held, and that sometimes listening to what we cannot find is part of the lullaby too. So let us keep listening, not just to the loud discoveries, but to the gentle traces. The curve of a footprint, the shape of a beak, the slant of a hip bone once swung in stride. Because every fossil is more than an object. It is a silence, broken gently. A dinosaur's voice, not raised in roar, but whispered into stone. Let's drift deeper now, into the silence that follows discovery. A fossil unearthed, cleaned, studied, admired. Then what? It waits again, but this time on shelves, in drawers, behind glass, inside museum walls. It rests not in darkness, but in the soft hush of curiosity. Visitors pass by, children press noses to the glass, and researchers glance with trained eyes. And even then, the bones are still whispering, not with words, but with presence. They continue to offer their quiet music to anyone still enough to hear it. In a quiet corner of a museum, a sauropod skull rests on padded foam. It is too fragile to mount, too rare to move. But there it lies, the head of a creature that once stood taller than trees. Its teeth are worn, its eye sockets empty, and yet it holds something profound, the way it faced the world. What it saw, how it bit through branches, how it tilted its gaze to the sun or stars. These are things we cannot measure, but we can imagine. And in that imagining, we offer the fossil a kind of life again, not in breath, but in memory. Not all fossils are silent. Some carry stories so vivid they feel like scenes. A bone with a bite mark tells us of predator and prey. A fused joint reveals arthritis. A healed fracture shows survival. One ancient skeleton of a theropod was found with tumors in its spine, its tail bent from disease. Even in death, it carried signs of pain and of endurance. These tiny details become chapters, not of conquest, but of resilience. Dinosaurs were not just thunder and teeth. They were also tenderness, struggle, healing. Now picture the hands that study these bones, year after year. A paleontologist grows older as the fossil stays the same. They carry notebooks filled with questions, dreams, sketches, guesses. They measure and remeasure, waiting for the fossil to say more. They name species after places, after shapes, after myths. Some bones are so fragmentary, the names become poetry. Dawn thief, river claw, hidden giant. These aren't just labels. They are lullabies in Latin, attempts to wrap ancient life in syllables we can hold. In some places, replicas are made, casts of fossils molded and painted with care. These are shared with schools, with museums too far from dig sites, with children who may never see the original. And while some think replicas are lesser, they too are whispers. They carry the shape and silence of the original. They remind us that the story is meant to travel, to spread, that fossils, even in imitation, still echo, and the echo stretches wider still, into art, into film, into books. The dinosaur becomes a symbol, not just of what once was, but of what continues to matter. It becomes a bridge between science and story, between fact and feeling. A child dreaming of T-Rex is not thinking of bone chemistry. They're dreaming of motion, of sound, of time, and that dream is part of the fossil's repair, the way its silence becomes sound again through imagination. But even science dreams. New tools allow us to peer deeper than ever before. CT scans reveal the inner labyrinths of fossilized skulls. Synchrotron radiation brings out details invisible to the eye. Digital reconstructions simulate muscles, tendons, movements. One day, we may even recreate scents, what the ancient forest smelled like after rain, what the breath of a sauropod stirred in the air. And still, none of it replaces the gentle awe of that first brushstroke across bone in the field, the first glint of fossil in sunlight. And as we dream forward, we must also step gently. Fossils are not infinite. Some are lost in war, in mining, in carelessness. Others are sold, separated from their stories. A tooth without its origin becomes a riddle with no answer. That is why protection matters, why dig sites are guarded, why scientists return year after year to the same dusty slopes, not to conquer the past, but to preserve its softest voices. In places like Liaoning, China, where fossils are layered like pages in a forgotten book, entire ecosystems lie stacked in stone. Fish, ferns, insects, birds, and dinosaurs, all pressed into fine volcanic ash from a sudden eruption. It's as if time itself paused mid-breath. The result is not just a fossil, it's a moment, a memory, a lullaby so intact it feels like a sigh from the earth. And what of the future? Will the bones we leave behind be found someday? Will our cities become fossilized ruins? Will someone dig through steel and plastic and find our skeletons folded in rest? Perhaps they'll wonder what songs we sang, what dreams we left behind, what kind of creatures we were. Perhaps they'll hold our bones with the same care, brush away time with the same tenderness. And in that moment, they'll continue the lullaby. Because the fossil is never finished. It begins with death, but it ends in connection, between worlds, between minds, between a creature that lived in warm rain 100 million years ago and you, reading about it now. That bridge is made of questions, of reverence, of repair. So the next time you pass a rock by the side of a trail, pause. It may be older than mountains. It may carry in its core the curve of a jaw, the print of a foot, the weight of a tail that once balanced a life. Pick it up gently, feel its silence, and listen. Somewhere inside, a dinosaur is still whispering. Amber begins as something soft, a drop of tree resin weeping from a wound in bark. Sticky and golden, it drips slowly down a trunk, capturing whatever it touches. A leaf, a wing, a breath of forest air, and then, over the centuries, it hardens. What was once fluid becomes time itself, sealed in glow. Inside its golden heart, the past is paused, not erased, not faded, but preserved with stunning stillness. Some of the most delicate traces of ancient life are not found in stone, but in these tiny windows of amber, where dinosaurs once brushed against trees and left behind the shimmer of feathers. Feathers are not always grand or colorful. Some are barely more than filaments, soft, hair-like threads that catch the air and hold warmth. In amber, they appear suspended like smoke, every strand visible, every curl a whisper. These are not modern bird feathers. They are older, stranger. They belong to a time when feathers were not just for flight. They were for insulation, for display, for balance, for dreams. They belonged to dinosaurs. Yes, dinosaurs had feathers. Not all of them, but many, especially the small ones, the ones that darted and climbed and glided like sparks through ancient trees. We once thought of dinosaurs only as scaly titans, thundering through swamps. But the more we find, fossils, feathers, even color, we learn that some of them were light-footed, plume-covered, and delicate as sleep. And the proof lies in amber. In Myanmar, miners once dug for jewelry, not fossils. But hidden within the amber, scientists began to notice something strange. Tiny barbs, symmetrical veins, even entire wings no longer than a thumb. Closer inspection revealed the truth. These were not insects. They were the feathers of creatures long gone, creatures that never perched on wires or pecked at breadcrumbs. These were dinosaur feathers, untouched by time, curled and frozen in gold. Amber is a storyteller unlike any other. It does not compress or crush. It does not replace bone with stone. Instead, it suspends. It holds texture, color, even the microscopic details of life. Feathers inside amber sometimes still shimmer with iridescence, suggesting colors that once glowed in forest shadows, greens, purples, coppers. These are not guesses. They are observations, mapped by the shape of pigment-carrying structures called melanosomes, locked inside for more than 90 million years. Imagine holding such a piece between your fingers. It is warm to the touch, though older than any city. Inside, a feather spirals gently. It belonged to a creature that perhaps never flew, but glided, flared its tail to impress a mate, or fluffed its body against the cold. That feather is not a fossil in the traditional sense. It is a pause, a breath caught mid-air, a dream caught mid-shed. Feathers are not unique to birds. In fact, they came before birds. Some of the earliest dinosaurs had primitive feathers, tufts of proto-fuzz. Over time, these evolved, branched, stiffened, specialized. Some became symmetrical for warmth, others asymmetrical for flight. Some formed crests, fans, elaborate tails like banners. And all of this happened long before the first true bird ever took to the skies. This challenges how we think of birds and dinosaurs. Birds are not the descendants of dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs, living, breathing, singing survivors of a lineage that spans over 150 million years. Every robin on a windowsill, every sparrow in a city park, every owl in a moonlit tree, each is a continuation of that dream, that evolutionary whisper that began with feathers, long before wings were built to fly. Amber feathers also tell us about behavior. Some contain bits of bark, pollen, even insect wings clinging to the strands. This suggests nests, grooming, interaction. One specimen showed signs of molting, the feather halfway shed when it was trapped. These are not just static remains. They are motion, interrupted. They are proof that ancient forests were alive, not only with footsteps, but with fluttering, with rustling, with the soft hush of feathers brushing feathers. In rare cases, entire tails are preserved in amber, vertebrae and all, covered in delicate plumage. One such tail came from a juvenile dinosaur, likely a small theropod, cousin to birds. It was no longer than a finger, yet its feathers were ornate, complex. They spiraled outward like fireworks frozen in gold. From such tails, we learn not just about structure, but about style, about display, identity, attraction. Feathers became language long before words existed. And as we study these amber dreams, we must also remember the forests that gave them. Ancient conifers stretching skyward, dripping resin that gleamed like honey. These trees too are part of the story. Their chemistry, their biology, their quiet grief when wounded, this is what made preservation possible. The tree and the feather, linked in an accident of time, now tell a story greater than either alone. Amber fossils are not grand or towering. They do not inspire awe through size. Instead, they invite quiet, a hush, a leaning closer. They are fossils for the fingertips, for the eye of the dreamer, for the scientist who listens with patience. In a world of noise, they are soft voices. And inside those voices, the dinosaurs still speak, not with roars, but with rustles, not with stomps, but with songs. So let us hold the amber gently. Let us tilt it to the light and wonder, not just at what we see, but at what still shimmers in its silence. Because inside that golden drop is a memory, not just of a feather, but of a moment, a gesture, a sigh from a creature that lived long before words, long before us, a dream caught by a tree, held safe for 100 million years, and finally passed to our hands. Now imagine that ancient forest not as a backdrop, but as a living character in the story, breathing, weeping, reaching. The trees were not silent witnesses, they were participants. When a small dinosaur brushed its tail against bark or preened beneath low branches, it left behind more than movement. Sometimes it left a feather, snagged or shed. And if the tree happened to bleed resin at that moment, the resin would flow over the feather like a protective sigh. Slowly, it would cradle each barb, each filament, wrapping it in a blanket of time. And as centuries passed, that drop would deepen in color, harden in stillness, and hide its secret until a human hand lifted it into the light. Inside that tiny world, sealed away for more than 90 million years, we find echoes not just of anatomy, but of behavior. Some amber pieces show multiple feathers pressed together, fanned out as if by wind or motion. These aren't just artifacts, they are freeze frames of life. One specimen reveals a feather mid-molt, its base pinched and curling, halfway shed from skin. Another contains hints of broken bristles, like a creature had been in a scuffle. They tell us something subtle yet profound. These dinosaurs didn't just wear feathers, they lived in them. To see a feather in amber is to peer into a life that once fluttered. And as we study the structures preserved within, we find clues not only about their purpose, but about evolution itself. Feathers didn't begin as tools for flight. They likely evolved for insulation, tiny fibers clustering to trap warmth in smaller-bodied dinosaurs. Over time, they began to serve other purposes: camouflage, signaling, balance. Eventually, flight became possible, but it was not the origin, it was the culmination. The feather was first a whisper of survival, then a brushstroke of expression, and only then a wing. The study of feathers in amber has reshaped our understanding of prehistoric ecosystems. Where we once imagined vast plains and towering beasts, we now see tangled forests and nimble climbers. Feathered dinosaurs may have darted between trees, glided from branch to branch, or scurried along bark with sharp, curved claws. Their feathers weren't always grand. Some were tufts, others bristles. But each told the environment it belonged to, a world of dense vegetation, filtered light, sudden movement. And among the feathers, we sometimes find other stowaways: mites, pollen, spores. the occasional lacy wing of an insect. These aren't distractions, they are context. A single feather in amber becomes a portrait of a moment. Who passed by, what season it was, what kind of tree stood nearby. One piece of amber contained the remains of both a feather and a beetle. The two might have never touched in life, yet in resin, their stories fused. They were part of the same world, and that world now reaches us through this fragile relic. Scientists use powerful microscopes and high-resolution scans to explore these amber fragments. They measure the spacing of barbs, the angles of hooklets, the shape of pigment bodies. These are not just details, they're vocabulary. A curved barb suggests flexibility. A dense pattern indicates waterproofing. In one famous specimen, a feather was preserved so well its microscopic texture matched that of modern hummingbirds. And though it belonged to a creature that never hovered over flowers, the connection stretches across time, linking beings through form and function. Even more astonishing is the preservation of color, not imagined color, not artistic guesswork, real, measurable remnants of hue. In certain pieces, melanosomes, tiny pigment-carrying structures, have been preserved. Their shape correlates to specific colors. Sausage-shaped ones suggest black or gray, spherical ones indicate reddish or golden tones. Through this, we've learned that some dinosaurs may have shimmered with iridescence, their feathers gleaming like oil on water. Others wore camouflage, mottled browns and rusts to hide among leaves. These discoveries transform our imagination. No longer do we see dinosaurs as dull-skinned monsters. We see vibrant creatures, striped, spotted, maybe even glowing. We picture forests not just of green, but of movement and color. Small theropods flashing throat feathers in courtship, juveniles with fuzz as soft as down, adults preening in the sun, carefully arranging their plumage with nimble claws. And the more we learn, the deeper the story grows. Because feathers in amber also offer hints about growth and aging. Some feathers are stiffer, others soft. Some show signs of wear, others are newly grown. This suggests that dinosaurs, like birds, molted. They replaced old feathers with new ones, season by season. They maintained their coats, they groomed, they cared for their appearance, not from vanity, but from instinct. To stay warm, to stay fast, to stay seen or unseen. There's even evidence that feathers evolved independently more than once. Other groups, like pterosaurs, distant flying reptiles, also show signs of filamentous covering. Though not true feathers, these structures hint at convergent evolution, different lineages reaching for similar solutions to life's challenges: warmth, flight, display. The dream of the feather, it seems, was not just a single thread in history. It was a recurring idea, stitched again and again into the fabric of life. Amber gives us more than fossils. It gives us stories uncrushed by pressure, unblurred by stone. It gives us expressions, arrangements, poses. It holds time without folding it. And so, when we peer into that warm, glowing trap, we are not looking at death. We are looking at pause, at presence, at a feather that once knew wind and now knows light. In some cultures, amber was believed to hold the sun, and in a way, it does. The forest sun dappled through canopy. The heat of the day, the feather drifted down, the golden hush of a lost afternoon, all of it preserved in that single moment. And as we examine it now, we don't just see structure. We see memory, we see beauty, we see the soft, persistent repair of deep time. Let us honor that. Let us approach these pieces not as curiosities, but as inheritances. The feather in amber is not a relic. It is a reminder that softness survives, that even in extinction there can be elegance, that dreams, once whispered through branches, can echo all the way to our hands. There is something sacred about the last section of a story, like the soft closing of a book or the final breeze at the end of a warm day. And when the story is about feathers sealed in golden amber, it deserves to end not with noise, but with reflection. The feather was once part of something moving, living, glowing beneath ancient sun. And now, as it rests beneath glass or inside velvet drawers, it continues its slow whisper through time. We often think of fossils as bones, teeth, shells, hard things. But amber fossils show us that the fragile also survives. That softness, when held in the right way, can outlast even the strongest storms. The feather, barely heavier than breath, should have vanished, should have decayed, been lost to fire or flood. And yet here it is, intricate and complete. What does that tell us, except that gentleness is not weakness, that sometimes the lightest touch endures the longest? In some museums, amber rests under warm light, magnified so that even a child can see the tiny hooks and curves. Visitors lean close, scientists bring students, artists sketch outlines into notebooks. And always, the same feeling returns. Wonder, not the kind that explodes, but the kind that settles. Slow, deep, calming. These moments remind us that science isn't just about data. It's about emotion, about the quiet gasp when you realize the thing in front of you is older than mountains and still shimmering with color. And it is not just museums that hold these stories. In field kits and research labs around the world, scientists cradle these pieces like fireflies. Some are no bigger than fingernails. Some still smell faintly of the earth. And in every one, a conversation begins. What creature shed this feather? What did it see, smell, feel? What did it leave behind, other than this trace? Not all answers arrive. Some never will. But amber teaches us to be patient. It teaches us to wait, to look gently, to listen not with expectation, but with openness. That is part of the repair, not just of history, but of ourselves. To remember how to wonder, to let the past be beautiful, not only because it was different, but because it was tender. To hold time, not like a weapon or a trophy, but like a lullaby. There is something almost spiritual in how amber wraps its contents. The resin didn't intend to preserve history. It flowed from pain, a tree's wound, a sap's defense. But through that pain, it created sanctuary. It turned accident into archive. And now, millions of years later, we find in that hurt a gift, a memory, sealed in honeyed light. What a strange kind of grace. The creatures who once wore these feathers are gone. Extinction took them in waves, some suddenly, others slowly. Their forests changed, their skies dimmed, their songs were silenced. But the feathers stayed, a few of them at least, enough to tell us not just what they were, but that they were. Enough to say, we were here, we glowed in the trees, we felt the wind. And birds, those living feathers, carry that story forward. Every pigeon, every wren, every hawk circling above highways. They are echoes with hearts. Their wings beat with the same rhythms. Their preening, their nesting, their flight, it is not mimicry, it is lineage. They are not just descendants of dinosaurs. They are continuations. They are what the feather dreamed it might become. Someday, a feather drifting down through today's forest might land in resin once more. And maybe, by some miracle, it too will fossilize. A crow's plume, a swallow's flight mark, a child's memory left behind in the curl of a dropped feather. And maybe, far in the future, someone will find it, and they will lean in close, and they will wonder what kind of world it came from, what kind of creature shed it, and the circle will close again, soft and full. There's a reason we use feathers in dreams. Pillows, wings, myths of angels. The feather is a symbol not just of flight, but of gentleness, and amber makes it eternal. Together, they create a kind of magic, one that doesn't vanish in the light, but glows brighter under it, one that doesn't shout, but hums. So let us hold that hum in our hands. Let us keep listening, keep watching, keep honoring the tiniest remnants of the world that came before us. Because inside each feather in amber is a lullaby, not for sleep, but for memory. A lullaby from the dinosaurs, passed to the trees, passed to the sap, passed to the earth, passed to you, and now you hold it. Not just the object, but the story. A dream that crossed millions of years to reach you, feather light and golden, and still very much alive. Beneath the sun, in deserts where wind moves like a soft whisper and shadows stretch for miles, there are hands bent gently over the ground. Not hurried, not loud, just steady. These are the hands of paleontologists. They do not dig like miners. They uncover like dreamers. With brushes smaller than your finger, with tools shaped like thoughts, they move grains of sand as if they are turning the pages of time itself. Because in that soil, under that dust, lie the stories of the Earth's deepest memory. Bones, shells, tracks, teeth. Not just objects, but echoes. Not just fossils, but the sleep of creatures who once walked, once breathed, and then waited. To watch a paleontologist work is to witness patience shaped into motion. The process is slow, almost reverent. First comes the hike, over ridges, through dry stream beds, across stone cracked by heat. They search not just with their eyes, but with their awareness. A curve in the rock, a shade different from its surroundings, a single edge peeking out of clay. And when something appears, something small and ancient, they pause, they kneel, they begin the quiet work of listening to the land. It begins with dust, a breath blown away, a soft flick of a brush, a careful circle drawn around stone that may be bone, or may be nothing. There is no rush. The fossil has waited for millions of years. It can wait a little longer. And so, the scientist becomes something else, not just an observer, but a caretaker, a guardian of fragments, a servant of story. Every layer peeled back is a step deeper into the Earth's lullaby, into the slow, deliberate rhythm of remembering. The tools are simple, tiny chisels, tweezers, air scribes that hum like bees. There are no machines that can speed this work without risking harm. The fossil is fragile, embedded in a cradle of rock that both protected and disguised it. Some bones crumble at a whisper, some flake away if breathed on too hard. So the work becomes intimate. Human hands learning the language of stone, fingers hovering over fractures, ears tuned to the change in pitch when tool touches fossil instead of matrix. And what they find isn't always beautiful, not at first. It may be just a fragment, a single tooth, a half-buried vertebra. But to trained eyes, it is a treasure, not for its shine or its size, but for its story. This tooth belonged to a jaw that belonged to a skull that once turned toward the wind. This bone was filled with marrow, which fed muscles, which moved legs, which left prints that are now gone. The fossil is the leftover of a life, and to uncover it is to gently pull back the veil between then and now. Every site tells its own tale. Some are mass graves, ancient riverbeds where floods swept life into silence. Others are nesting grounds, where eggs once lay warm under the sun. Some sites span thousands of layers, each one a page in the planet's diary. Paleontologists read these pages not with certainty, but with humility. They ask, always, not what is obvious, but what is possible. Could this bone have supported flight? Could this ridge have held muscle? Could this pattern suggest care, or play, or sleep? Sometimes the fossils are whole, skeletons arranged as if in rest. A curled body, tail wrapped around its ribs, head tucked down as if dreaming. These finds are rare, miraculous, the result of perfect chance, quick burial, low oxygen, soft sediment. But more often, what is found is broken, pieces scattered, clues without conclusions. And that is when the paleontologist becomes something else again, not just a discoverer, but a weaver of possibilities. They reconstruct not just bones, but motions, not just bodies, but lives. And always, they take notes, sketches in sun-wrinkled journals, measurements written with care, GPS points logged, photos taken from every angle. Because context matters, where the fossil lies, what surrounds it, how it was touched by wind or water or fire. A bone without context is a puzzle piece with no puzzle. But a bone in place, with layers intact and relationships mapped, becomes a voice, a sentence, a beginning. The work doesn't end in the field. Fossils are wrapped, sometimes in foil, sometimes in plaster jackets, protected for the journey home. In labs, the real work of cleaning begins. Under bright lights and magnifying lenses, technicians spend hours, sometimes months, removing the final layers of matrix. Every scrape is a risk, every slip a danger, but every surface revealed is a joy. It's as if the fossil is waking up, piece by piece, stretching from its sleep in stone. And the lab becomes a place of whispering, not literal sound, but a kind of knowing. Technicians talk to each other in glances, in sighs, in small questions. Is this a break or a feature? Could this be part of the scapula? Do you think we should stop here? The fossil, in its silence, leads the way. It tells them what it needs, not in language, but in line, in curve, in texture. And they listen. Eventually, the fossil is catalogued, studied, scanned, maybe even displayed. It finds its place in a drawer, a museum case, a digital database. But its journey is not over. Students will hold it. Researchers will revisit it. Ideas will grow around it. And maybe one day it will be the key to a new theory. A link between species, a shift in understanding, a window into warmth or flight or care. And always behind that fossil is the person who found it. Not famous, not loud, just someone who walked a long way, knelt in the dust, and brushed a single curve from the earth. Someone who waited, who listened, who treated stone as if it were breath. That person becomes part of the story too, not in textbooks maybe, but in the fossil's journey, from silence to song. Let's drift further now, beyond the dusty dig sites and glowing labs, into the wider world that makes paleontology possible. Because these gentle archaeologists do not work alone, not really. They are in conversation with the earth itself, with wind that sculpts the landscape, with time that layers memories like blankets, with water that carves canyons and reveals secrets long buried. Every fossil found is the result of a quiet collaboration, a slow agreement between nature and patience. Time does the burying, wind and erosion do the revealing, and humans do the noticing. There is a kind of devotion in returning to the same field site, year after year, season after season. Some paleontologists spend decades in one location, watching as the land shifts slightly, as the sun touches different slopes, as a bone finally shows itself after decades of waiting. They know the terrain like a song. They know which rocks fracture with a tap and which hold too tightly. They begin to feel when the earth is ready to share. And when it does, they kneel again, humbled, careful. In Mongolia's Gobi Desert, the wind moves like memory. It brushes over ancient dunes where protoceratops once nested and raptors once hunted. Fossils emerge slowly, partially uncovered by time itself, like forgotten letters stirred up by breeze. Here, paleontologists live in tents, sip tea under stars, and whisper their discoveries into the dry air. They do not shout. There is reverence in the work, even when it's hard, even when the days are long and the heat unforgiving, because every bone found is a gift from a world that no longer exists. And when the fossils do emerge, they are not always what was expected. Some sites, long thought to hold one kind of dinosaur, suddenly reveal another. Some bones are twisted in ways that suggest injury or disease. Others are found in positions that suggest behavior, resting, nesting, defending. A dinosaur found curled around its eggs, another with a broken limb that healed before death. These are not just scientific findings, they are stories with feeling. They show us that even long-extinct creatures experienced struggle, tenderness, adaptation. They weren't just fossils, they were lives. In Argentina's Patagonia, fossil beds stretch beneath grassy hills and stony ridges. The land is wide and quiet. Here, some of the largest dinosaurs ever discovered, titanosaurs, once walked. Their bones are massive, like trees fallen in sleep. To unearth even one vertebra can take weeks. To find an entire skeleton can take years. Teams work together in silence, passing brushes and chisels, sometimes not speaking for hours. But their silence is full. It is a silence of focus, of connection, of shared awe. Back in labs, 3D scanning allows bones to be studied without being touched. Technology becomes another layer of gentleness, letting us peer inside fossils, map their density, recreate their shapes in digital space. With these scans, paleontologists can test movement. They can simulate muscle attachment. They can visualize how a dinosaur might have turned its head, lifted its foot, breathed through its chest. These reconstructions are not guesses. They are careful hypotheses, drawn from shape, wear, placement. They are the soft science of motion. And sometimes, mistakes are part of the process. A fossil is misidentified. A reconstruction proves incorrect. But even then, the work is not wasted. Every error leads to refinement. Every question deepens the listening. Paleontology is not about arriving at the final truth. It is about getting closer, step by step, brushstroke by brushstroke. It is about being willing to change your mind when the fossil asks you to. Some discoveries reshape entire timelines. The finding of feathers in dinosaurs, the tracing of evolutionary links between birds and theropods, the revelation that some species cared for their young. These are not dramatic moments. They arrive like dawn, slow, golden, undeniable. A single fossil in a quiet drawer, a pattern noticed during a late-night study, and suddenly everything opens. The map of life rearranges itself, not with noise, but with wonder. And even now, there is so much still hidden. Beneath rainforests, beneath oceans, beneath cities. Fossils lie waiting in places we may never reach. And yet, we keep looking, because every uncovered bone adds a brushstroke to the portrait of Earth's past. It tells us who shared this planet with us, long before we arrived, and perhaps who we might become, if we learn to listen as they did, not to each other, but to the rhythms of land and time. Paleontologists often speak of the moment, the instant a fossil is revealed and the realization settles in. It is not loud. It does not feel like discovery in the dramatic sense. It feels like recognition, like remembering something you've never known before. Your breath stills. Your hands pause. The fossil looks back at you, and for a second, you are not in a field or a lab. You are in the middle of a very old story, one you've been asked to help finish. That is the quiet power of this science. It does not command attention. It invites reflection. It does not rush. It meanders, like a river finding its shape. It does not boast. It whispers, through sediment, through stone, through the delicate imprint of a footstep taken 150 million years ago and still pressed into the earth. And when the work is done for the day, when tools are packed and bones are wrapped and the sun lowers itself over the hills, the paleontologist sits and looks back, at the trench, at the ridge, at the sky above that has changed so little in all this time. And in that silence, they know, they have not just uncovered a fossil, they have touched a thread in the great web of life, and they have done it gently, as all sacred things should be touched. Now the story bends toward stillness, toward the soft ending that all fossils eventually reach, not the end of their being, but the beginning of their long rest in human care. Because once a fossil has been uncovered, studied, scanned, and archived, it becomes more than an object. It becomes part of a library, a collection of voices made silent by time, but still full of meaning. Paleontologists know this. They do not chase glory. They do not dig to display. They dig to remember, to preserve, to place each bone carefully into the larger story of Earth's memory. And memory, like stone, has weight. Each fossil added to a museum shelf is a whisper from a world we will never fully know. A vertebra may look like a curve of ivory, but it once held the strength of motion, the flexibility of breath. A jaw may seem like just a bite-shaped relic, but it once knew hunger, tasted leaves or flesh, shaped a life. These fossils are not decorations. They are monuments to existence, to survival, to change. Even long after a site is closed and the dust has settled, the data lives on. Field notes become permanent records. Photos become digital archives. Plaster jackets crack with age, but their contents remain. And every few years, someone returns. A student, a researcher. They open a drawer, pull out a bone, and ask new questions. The fossil, though unmoving, becomes new again. Under new eyes, it offers new insights. This is not repetition. This is restoration. This is the science of soft renewal. In classrooms, young minds lean over casts of fossils, tracing grooves with fingers that tremble slightly with curiosity. A child might ask if this dinosaur had friends, or what it saw when it woke. These questions are not foolish. They are profound, because they turn the fossil from a thing into a being. They bring imagination into science, and that blend of wonder and fact is where true learning begins. Paleontology is not about answers alone. It's about keeping the questions alive. And it's not just children who ask. Paleontologists themselves remain forever curious. Even after decades of work, they speak with awe. They talk of their first discovery, the one that hooked them forever. A shell peeking from a cliff, a bone eroding from a canyon wall. They remember the light, the feel of the air, the scent of the stone. Because finding a fossil is not a task. It is a moment, a connection between two beings separated by time, but united in silence. There are fossils that have not yet been named, ones waiting in boxes, in private collections, in overlooked field reports. And there are also fossils still in the ground, waiting for rain to wash just enough earth away. The earth holds her secrets gently. She does not rush. She reveals when she is ready. And paleontologists, if they are patient, are sometimes chosen to witness that unveiling. The fossil rises into view like a breath held too long, finally released. Some fossils, once found, travel the world. They go from dig site to lab to exhibition halls, seen by millions. Others stay tucked away, known only to a handful of researchers. But whether famous or hidden, each fossil holds equal worth, because each one says, "I was here." Each one proves that life has taken many forms, across many ages, under many skies. And the earth remembers them all. She keeps the bones, the footprints, the leaf impressions in clay. She stores the secrets in shale and limestone, in volcanic ash and river silt. Paleontologists are simply the readers of these texts. Their work is to translate, to interpret, to pass the story forward without distorting its shape. They are not rewriting history. They are listening to it, carefully. And the story never truly ends. A fossil found today may lead to a new expedition 10 years from now. A species identified in one continent may be found again in another, connecting lands once split by oceans. Each discovery branches into others, like roots growing deeper, like rivers seeking sea. And through it all, the paleontologist returns, to the field, to the lab, to the fossil itself, again and again, not for fame, but for the joy of touching deep time. The word paleontology means the study of ancient beings, but truly it is the study of what lingers, of what endures beyond decay. It is the study of presence after absence, of structure after silence, and those who walk its path know that they are caretakers of something fragile, not just bones, but the human need to understand, to feel connected to the long, long thread of life that stretches behind us. And so, in a quiet moment at the end of a long day, a paleontologist might sit beneath the stars, those same stars that shone over dinosaurs, over trilobites, over the first green shoots to pierce the ocean's edge. They might hold a small fossil in their palm and wonder, who touched this last? Who walked this earth when this bone was part of a body? What songs did the wind sing then, and what songs might it still be singing now? Because this work is not about dust or data alone. It is about memory, wrapped in stone. It is about repair, not of the fossil itself, but of our connection to what has come before. It is about listening, with our tools and our hearts, to the earth's soft voice, and answering not with noise, but with care. That is what the gentle archaeologists do. They kneel not to dig, but to remember. They brush away time with tenderness. They hold silence with reverence. And in doing so, they remind us all that deep beneath our feet lies a story too soft to shout, too old to hurry, too beautiful to forget. There is a moment, deep within every living thing, when the world is drawn in, quietly, invisibly, and becomes part of the body, a breath. It is the first thing we do when we arrive, and the last thing we give when we leave. Breathing is so gentle, so constant, that we forget it is a miracle. But the earth remembers, and if you look closely enough, if you listen through stone and time, you'll find that even creatures long gone, those who walked the jungles of the Jurassic and the swamps of the Cretaceous, still carry the memory of breath. Not in air, but in bone. Not in lungs, but in the architecture of fossils. Breathing is not just about lungs. It is about space. It is about shape. In modern birds, the skeleton tells the story of air, hollow bones, air sacs, a system so efficient it moves oxygen in a loop, flowing not just in and out, but through. This avian breath doesn't pause. It streams. And when paleontologists study the bones of certain dinosaurs, they see hints of the same story etched into the fossil's form. Openings in vertebrae, delicate hollows in ribs, strange loops where solid bone should be. These are not accidents. They are the shadows of lungs, the footprints of air. Some of the most powerful clues lie not in lungs themselves, since soft tissue rarely fossilizes, but in the bones that supported them. Scientists call this pneumatization, a word that sounds like wind through branches. It means the bone was invaded by air sacs. It means that even in death, the structure speaks of breath. Some theropods, close relatives of modern birds, had bones so light and hollow that they would seem fragile, if not for their strength. Their spines were honeycombed with air chambers. Their hips, their shoulders, even their skulls carried the imprint of breathing. Now imagine that, a creature 30 feet long, with claws and teeth and feathers, but inside, a breathing system as gentle and refined as any songbird. Air flowing through its bones, oxygen delivered in waves, its chest rising not with effort, but with grace. The image is not fierce, it is poetic. The dinosaur, once pictured as lumbering and heavy, becomes something else entirely, buoyant, rhythmic, alive with quiet motion. This discovery shifted the story. For years, dinosaurs were imagined as cold-blooded, slow, dependent on the warmth of the sun. But evidence began to suggest otherwise. The structure of their lungs, the speed of their growth, the shape of their bones, all pointed toward warmth, toward energy, toward a body that ran not on sunbeams, but on breath. Warm-bloodedness meant independence. It meant stamina. It meant chase and escape and survival. And it meant that breath was not just a necessity, it was a gift. Fossils of certain sauropods, those long-necked, pillar-legged giants, also show signs of complex breathing. Their necks were too long for a simple in and out system. Air would have to travel too far, growing stale before it reached the lungs. But with air sacs, pockets along the trachea that acted as bellows, their breath stayed fresh. Air moved continuously, cycling like wind through a canyon. The lungs pulled in oxygen, while other sacs pushed out carbon dioxide, a harmony of inhale and exhale. It is a design so efficient, it is still unmatched today. These sauropods, with their swan-like necks and massive torsos, carried their breath across great distances. A single breath traveled through a system more elaborate than ours, touching more organs, feeding more cells. And yet, the entire process was silent. No growl, no snort, just movement, just flow, a cathedral of air, rising and falling with the rhythm of ancient life. In fossils, we do not see this movement directly, but we see the signs, the hollows where air sacs once lived, the pathways carved in bone, the thickness where pressure once pressed and flowed. Paleontologists read these signs like maps. They compare them to birds, to crocodiles, to clues hidden in anatomy. They run simulations, study growth rings, reconstruct muscle attachments. And from that, they breathe life into silence. Even the ribs tell a story. Some dinosaurs had uncinate processes, bony tabs that helped pull the chest open with each breath. This same structure exists in birds today, and it helps them fly without gasping. It stabilizes their chest wall, allowing air to move smoothly without collapse. In dinosaurs, this meant efficiency. It meant quiet strength. It meant lungs that did not just breathe, but breathed with purpose. One remarkable fossil, preserved in 3 dimensions by volcanic ash, revealed not only bones, but the delicate traces of internal organs. It showed the position of the lungs, the way the diaphragm might have moved, the symmetry of the thoracic cavity. It was a moment of revelation, to see breath not as imagination, but as imprint. To know that inside that stillness once lived movement, gentle and constant. And then there are the birds, the living fossils. Every time a sparrow takes flight, it carries with it the blueprint of its ancestors. Its lungs, its sacs, its rhythm, they are echoes of breath that began in the Mesozoic. When it sings, the sound is carried by air pushed through a system that once fluttered inside creatures with claws and teeth. The bird is not separate from the dinosaur. It is the next verse in a very old song. This understanding does more than inform us. It transforms us. We begin to see that dinosaurs were not only creatures of power, but of precision. They were not only hunters or grazers, they were breathers, movers of wind, keepers of rhythm. Their lungs were not just organs, they were instruments, and each inhalation was part of the Earth's larger music. So when you see a fossil, think beyond the bone. Think of the space it once held. Think of the air that passed through it. Think of the rise and fall, the soft motion beneath the ribs. That breath, though gone, is not lost. It shaped the bone. It wrote its name in structure. And now, through the hands of paleontologists, it reaches us, not in gusts, but in whispers. The dinosaurs learned to breathe not with thunder, but with grace. And their fossils carry that grace still, in every curve and hollow. All you have to do is look and listen and let your own breath slow in rhythm with theirs. Now, let us breathe a little deeper into the mystery, following the currents of air that once moved through creatures too old to name and too wondrous to forget. The story of dinosaur lungs is not just one of efficiency or survival. It is one of design shaped by time, of evolution gently perfecting a system with the grace of wind passing through reeds. Each vertebra, each air sac, each hollow chamber carved in ancient bone is a verse in this quiet song, echoing the rhythm of life beneath scales and feathers alike. In certain fossils, especially those of theropods, scientists find what they call pleurocoels, deep pits and recesses in the vertebrae, formed when air sacs invaded the bone. These are not scars, they are signatures. They suggest that air moved not only through lungs, but into the skeleton itself, reducing weight without sacrificing strength. The spine became a bridge of breath, light enough for balance, strong enough for motion. And though these creatures never spoke, their bones say everything. They tell us how they moved, how they breathed, how they stayed warm in cold winds or kept cool beneath hot Mesozoic suns. In modern birds, air sacs serve as reservoirs, allowing oxygen to flow even as the lungs remain fixed in place. This is different from the way mammals breathe, with our lungs expanding and contracting. Birds don't breathe in cycles. They breathe in streams. The air flows forward and then outward, touching the lungs in one direction, like a river over stone. And through comparisons of fossil anatomy, particularly in creatures like Velociraptor and Deinonychus, we now see that some dinosaurs likely shared this same elegant mechanism. What does that mean for our understanding of their lives? It means they were more active than once believed, capable of longer hunts, faster pursuits, greater endurance. It means they didn't need to pause and pant, didn't need to slow in order to cool down. Their breath followed them like a shadow, constant, smooth, vital. Their bodies were not merely machines of muscle and bone, but of wind and motion. They were dancers in ecosystems full of breath and hunger and heat. This air-driven structure also supported something more subtle, vocalization. Sound, after all, begins with air. And though the exact voices of dinosaurs are lost to time, their respiratory anatomy offers clues. Some may have produced deep, resonant calls like crocodilians, vibrating the air through throat sacs and long passages. Others may have hissed or drummed the ground, and some perhaps began to echo the earliest versions of birdsong, high whistles, chirps, soft throat clicks that filled the forests of long ago with invisible messages. In fossils from Liaoning province in China, where delicate sediments preserve fine detail, researchers have found not only bones, but the shape of soft structures, the trachea, the lungs, even the suggestion of a syrinx, the voice box of birds. If confirmed, this would be among the most significant finds in respiratory evolution, suggesting that some dinosaurs were not only breathing, but singing. Not just surviving, but communicating. Air became not only breath, but language. And if they sang, it changes how we picture them. The jungle does not sleep in silence. It thrums, it hums, it fills with the noise of insects, leaves, water, and creatures speaking their presence. A feathered dinosaur calling from a tree limb, a small predator huffing low to a mate, a mother guarding her eggs, exhaling softly through heat and patience. Each breath was part of a larger dialogue, not of words, but of being. Fossils hold the shape of that possibility, tucked into every groove and cavity. This inner design also tells us about the temperatures they could withstand. Warm-blooded creatures regulate internal heat, but this creates demands on energy and oxygen. The flow-through lung system of dinosaurs, so similar to birds, supports this level of metabolism. They weren't sluggish lizards baking in the sun. They were kinetic, efficient, adaptable. Their breath fed not just organs, but behavior, migrating, mating, building nests, fleeing storms, hunting in twilight. We see this especially in the fossilized bone histology, the microscopic structure of bones sliced and studied in thin layers. These reveal fast growth, strong blood flow, and signs of high metabolic rates. Some dinosaurs reached adult size in just a few years, growing with the urgency of survival. That kind of growth needs oxygen, and their lungs supplied it not in bursts, but in rivers. Even juvenile fossils, the tiny bones of hatchlings and young ones, show signs of pneumatization. This tells us that the respiratory system developed early, supporting the needs of fragile new life in a dangerous world. Tiny lungs learning to breathe under the watchful gaze of the forest canopy, bones growing light and airy to carry their future weight. It is a kind of poetry to think of breath beginning so soon, shaping the body from within. The discoveries are ongoing. New imaging techniques allow scientists to see inside fossils without breaking them. Digital reconstructions offer animated views of how lungs may have expanded, how ribs may have moved. With each study, the mystery grows clearer, not in finality, but in beauty. The more we know, the more we feel. And the more we feel, the more we realize that breath connects us, not just to each other, but to the deep past. The dinosaurs that breathed with air sacs were not strange. They were familiar. Their systems echo in the wings of pigeons, in the calls of cranes, in the soft flutter of a dove's chest beneath your hand. The continuity is not only scientific, it is emotional. When you feel the warmth of a bird resting in your palm, you are also touching the echo of a world that vanished millions of years ago but left its breath behind. And in this breath is meaning, not just function, not just survival, but continuity, fragility, strength. The realization that the smallest action, an inhale, an exhale, links us to those who lived before us in ways no monument ever could. The lungs of dinosaurs are gone, but the spaces they left, the shapes they carved into bone, remain. And those spaces are still full of breath, if you know how to listen. Let us now follow that last breath to where the story softens, where lungs that once rose and fell beneath sun and storm now lie still beneath layers of time. There is no air left in these fossils, no motion, no warmth. But there is something more enduring. There is memory etched into every hollow curve, every chamber in bone where breath once traveled like music. It is here, in the stillness, that we feel breath more profoundly, not in its presence, but in its trace, not in the chest that expands, but in the shape it left behind. The final part of this story is not about discovering lungs, but about honoring them. In the fossilized remains of creatures who walked before language, before seasons as we know them, before even the shapes of continents were complete, we find the same rhythm we carry in our own chests. Inhale, pause, exhale, silence. A cycle as old as Earth itself. These rhythms are what shaped them, and us. The structures that made breathing possible were not ornaments. They were foundations, and those foundations whisper still through stone and shadow. Sometimes the most haunting fossils are not the large ones, not the giants with massive ribs and towering vertebrae, but the small ones. A bird-sized dinosaur, curled in sleep, its bones feathered with the shadow of air sacs, its ribs gently arched. You can almost imagine it resting. You can almost hear the air that no longer flows. These are the fossils that teach without volume. They teach by what they held and by what they left behind. In museums, these bones are mounted with precision, vertebrae aligned, ribs spaced, necks arched as they may have once moved. Visitors walk past them, reading plaques, taking pictures. But sometimes someone stops, leans close, wonders what it felt like to breathe like that, to carry air through bone, to fill hollows with wind, to move not with weight, but with lightness. And in that quiet moment, the fossil speaks, not in language, but in alignment, in the way it was built, in the way it still holds space for something invisible. The beauty of breathing is that it never truly belongs to one creature. It is shared, passed down, transformed. The same oxygen that filled the lungs of a feathered dinosaur may, through the turning of time and the looping of ecosystems, now swirl in the air around you. Breath is not linear. It is circular. It is return. And that idea that we share breath across time gives the fossil lungs a kind of immortality. Their work did not end. It continued, through evolution, through adaptation, through flight. Modern birds carry the legacy of that system with such quiet elegance. Watch them fly, and you're watching lungs in motion, air gliding through a body engineered by millions of years of patient adjustment. They do not waste. They do not falter. Their breath moves like water, like wind, like story. They are not echoes of dinosaurs. They are extensions. The breath of the ancient still rides the wings of the living. Even in labs, as researchers peer through microscopes or analyze CT scans, there is a kind of reverence. They see not just structure, but story. A bone with pneumatization isn't just a lightened piece. It is a memory of flow. A fossilized rib isn't just part of a cage. It is the outline of a chamber that once filled and emptied, again and again, in life. Scientists do not say this with poetry, but they feel it. It is in the hush of their voices, the care in their notes, the way they cradle a fragment as if it still carried something fragile. And perhaps it does. Perhaps fossils do carry something more than shape. Perhaps they carry intention, the deep biological wish to live, to breathe, to be. Each fossil is a record of that wish fulfilled, if only for a time. Each one is a song paused in stone. The deeper meaning of these discoveries is not just about physiology, it is about connection. When we learn how dinosaurs breathed, we learn something about how we breathe. When we see how their systems adapted, we understand how ours work. When we recognize the complexity in their airways, we marvel at our own. And this marvel, this reflection, draws us closer, not just to them, but to the continuity of life. In some places, fossils are still being found with feathers, with soft tissue, with impressions so fine they seem unreal. And with every one, the picture sharpens. Not of monsters, not of dragons, but of beings, real animals with needs, with systems, with quiet internal miracles. The lungs are not flashy, they are not claws or fangs, but they are essential. They are the unsung rhythm, and that rhythm beats in all of us still. So next time you take a deep breath, let it be a gentle one. Let it be a reminder that breathing is not just your own gift. It is a thread running through time, shared with birds in trees, with mammals in forests, with dinosaurs beneath vanished skies. Every inhale is a bridge, every exhale a letting go. And in that cycle, repeated billions of times across eons, lies the true story of life. The fossils do not speak of breath directly, but they show us how breath shaped them, how it carved hollows in their bones, how it structured their movements, how it allowed them to be not just alive, but active, alert, engaged in the world. We are here because they breathed, and in honoring that, we learn to listen more carefully to our own. The dinosaurs may be gone, but their lungs remain, in stone, in birds, in memory, and in the wind that passes softly through the trees. Their breath, once hidden, now teaches us how to pause, how to feel the air, how to thank the silence that once moved through their ribs and now rests gently in ours. Imagine a world where music was never made by instruments, never carved from wood or strung with wire, but carried in the movement of bodies, low rumbles in the earth, soft cracks in the air, sweeping arcs written not with ink, but with tales. Long ago, in the hush of prehistoric forests and the open stillness of fern-filled plains, some of the largest creatures ever to live balanced their lives on tails as long as buses, as fluid as waves. And though those tails no longer move, their fossils remain, and with them, a kind of song, a memory of motion, of purpose, of poise. The tail is not an afterthought. In many animals, it is the silent engine of balance and grace. For dinosaurs, especially the long-necked giants and swift-footed hunters, it was more than a limb. It was a lever, a rudder, a counterweight, a story in motion. Each vertebra tells part of that story, from the thick, anchoring bones near the hips to the narrowing tips that once flicked through the wind. These bones, fossilized in long chains, curve through stone like a river remembered. In theropods, those bipedal, often carnivorous dinosaurs, the tail acted like a balancing pole, allowing them to walk upright with precision. Picture a creature like Deinonychus or Velociraptor, its body angled forward, its limbs moving in bursts. Without the tail's counterweight, it would fall. But with it, it became a dancer. Every leap, every turn, every sprint was anchored by the subtle shift of mass behind it. The tail was not passive. It responded, adjusted, anticipated. It was part of the animal's thought, its reflex, its rhythm. Some fossils even show evidence of specialized tendons along the tail, ossified structures that stiffened certain regions while leaving others more flexible. This allowed parts of the tail to act like springs, storing energy, then releasing it in motion. A whip of speed, a snap of defense, a turn sharp enough to chase prey or avoid a strike. These are not fantasy. They are preserved in the grooves and scars of fossilized bone, in the tension points where tendons once pulled and released. And in sauropods, those colossal plant eaters with necks that reached the treetops, the tail became something else entirely, an architectural masterpiece. Long, tapering, and often composed of over 80 vertebrae, the sauropod tail was the answer to an ancient question. How do you balance a neck as long as a bus? Nature responded with symmetry. The tail extended behind like a spine's soft echo, balancing the front heavy pull of the neck and helping the animal remain stable as it walked. Without the tail, it would tip. With it, it moved like a suspended bridge, flexible, strong, serene. Some sauropods, like Diplodocus, had tails so long and thin at the end that they may have functioned like bullwhips, capable, according to some studies, of breaking the sound barrier with a crack. Imagine that sound, a single whip-like report, echoing across the floodplains, not from combat or fury, but perhaps from communication. A greeting, a warning, a rhythm passed from one giant to another. If true, these tales were not just tools, they were voices. Music carried through bone and air. In fossil beds where multiple individuals have been found together, paleontologists wonder about behavior. Did sauropods travel in herds? Did they follow each other in lines, their tails swinging in synchrony? If so, then the movement of tails might have been more than instinct. It might have been choreography. Not for spectacle, but for safety, for awareness. The brush of one tail might alert another to danger. The sway of a row might signal a shift. Fossils can't confirm intention, but they can whisper it in pattern. In smaller dinosaurs, tails also served as flags. In ceratopsians, ornithopods, and early bird-like species, tails often carried crests, quills, or feathered fans. These were not aerodynamic, they were expressive. And though we cannot know what they said, we know that in the natural world, display is language. A flash of color, a ripple of feathers, a lift and a fall. These motions do not make words, but they make meaning. They are seen. They are remembered. Even in extinction, tails teach us. In the lab, fossil tails are reconstructed bone by bone, scanned in 3D, modeled with virtual muscle and tendon. Scientists simulate motion, test balance, explore possibilities. And what they find is often more graceful than imagined. The tail was not a dragging burden. It was a guide, a tool of precision. It adjusted posture. It caught the wind. It helped creatures move through their world not with heaviness, but with flow. Consider the fossil of a hadrosaur, found with its tail curved naturally, as if in the act of turning. It is a frozen gesture, a memory of motion caught mid-breath. That curve says more than 1,000 words. It says, I moved, I turned. I lived in a world with space, with direction, with intent, and the bones, still curved, carry that truth forward. In birds today, the tail has evolved into a fan of feathers and a small set of fused bones called the pygostyle. It serves a different role, steering in flight, signaling in dance, but the origin is the same, a balance organ, a tool of navigation, a remnant of the long-tailed ancestors whose breath moved through hollow bones and whose rhythm still beats in the wind. The fossil tail, then, is not silent. It is the record of an ancient instrument, one that played not notes, but motion, one that moved through forests and across plains, leaving behind not sound, but shape. And in that shape, the music still lingers. All you need to do is follow the line, vertebra by vertebra, curve by curve, and let your imagination listen. Because in the end, a tail is not just something behind. It is something that follows the body, like memory follows thought, like echo follows voice. It carries balance, intention, sometimes even joy. And in the fossils, it still moves, not in speed, but in story. A song of motion, written in stone. Now let us drift further along the spine of time, following the tail through more than just bone, into the meaning it carried, across movement, communication, and the subtle architecture of survival. The tail was not one thing, not a single answer to a single need. It was a solution written in layers, shaped by evolution's quiet conversation with gravity, with landscape, with the rising pulse of life. To study the tail is to understand how dinosaurs shaped their space, and how space, in turn, shaped them. In armored dinosaurs like Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus, the tail transformed into defense. These creatures were not swift, they were not small, but their tails became weapons, clubs of fused bone, sharp spikes mounted on muscular shafts. Stegosaurus carried 4 long spikes at its rear, arranged in a fan that could swing with power enough to break bone. This was not just a tail, it was a last word, a warning, a punctuation mark of survival. The fossil record shows vertebrae from predators with puncture wounds that match these spikes, proof that the tail could defend, could injure, could change the outcome of an encounter. And yet, these tails were not always rigid. They were balanced on joints that allowed for sweeping arcs, guided by ligaments, pulled by muscles. The ankylosaur's club, for example, was not dragged. It was lifted, aimed, swung with purpose. Fossil evidence shows expanded vertebrae near the base of the tail, built to absorb force. These were hammers on hinges, not burdens on bodies. The tail became an extension of will, of strategy. And in that, We glimpse something more than instinct. We glimpse intention. In contrast, the tails of early birds and bird-like dinosaurs were transformed into instruments of aerial control. The long feathered tails of Archaeopteryx or Microraptor were not just remnants of reptilian ancestry, they were essential tools for steering, braking, balancing in flight. Fossils show broad feathers fanning from elongated tailbones, symmetrical in shape, perfect in preservation. In simulations, these tails act like rudders, stabilizing the creature mid-glide, allowing for adjustments mid-air. They suggest a level of control, of choice. These dinosaurs weren't falling from trees. They were navigating the sky. Even in non-flying species, tails played complex roles. Some dinosaurs used them to communicate, raising them high, thrashing them in patterns, signaling danger or dominance. In species like Protoceratops, whose tail vertebrae are often found splayed in death poses, paleontologists speculate that the tail was used visually, perhaps as a social display. Others, like the hadrosaurs, may have used tail motion to maintain group cohesion while moving in herds. Fossil trackways show multiple individuals walking in unison, side by side, with tail impressions aligned. A choreography of travel, a collective rhythm. These behaviors are not carved directly into stone. They live in interpretation, in evidence layered gently across bone shape, muscle scars, tail impressions, sediment placement. It is science, yes, but it is also listening to what the body once asked of the tail and what the tail gave in return. Because every movement left a trace, and every trace is an answer waiting to be read. In some cases, fossilized skin impressions show that tails were not just bony structures, but covered in scales, in quills, in filament-like feathers. These coverings weren't merely protection, they were expression. The tail became a canvas. In species like Psittacosaurus, bristle-like structures emerged from the tail tip, forming a kind of visual flare. No one knows exactly what they were for: threat, attraction, camouflage. But they were not random. They were choices made by evolution, shaped by survival, echoed in design. And what of regeneration? In many modern reptiles, tails can regrow if lost. The fossil record hints that some small dinosaurs, particularly early ones, may have had similar capacities. Fossils of juvenile specimens showed tail vertebrae with unusual healing patterns, suggesting breakage and partial repair. Imagine that, a creature chased by a predator, losing part of its tail in escape, only to have it regrow, shorter, perhaps, less perfect, but functional. Even in loss, the tail was resilient. It adapted. It continued the story. As paleontologists dig deeper, both into the earth and into the digital modeling of ancient anatomy, they uncover how interconnected the tail was with the rest of the body. The musculature attaching it to hips, the tendons running alongside limbs, the nerves that passed through vertebral canals. These connections meant that movement wasn't isolated. A turn of the head required a shift of the tail. A leap forward needed a counterbalance behind. The tail was the quiet partner in every action, the silent assistant behind every stride, every gaze. Even in rest, the tail spoke. Fossils preserved in sleeping positions, like those of Mei Long, a feathered dinosaur found with its tail curled around its body, suggest comfort, awareness, maybe even care. The tail wrapped, not just for warmth, but perhaps for protection, for peace. In life, it balanced motion. In rest, it shaped stillness. And in death, it preserved the pose, a lullaby in vertebrae, a final posture held for eternity. When we walk through a museum and see a dinosaur skeleton posed in a dynamic stance, tail arched, neck extended, it is easy to forget how much guesswork went into that arc. It took years of comparing fossils, of modeling weight distribution, of scanning tendon scars and muscle attachment sites, just to determine how a tail curved, how high it was held, how fast it could swing. This work is not spectacle. It is reverence. It is paleontology at its most poetic, drawing motion from stillness, grace from stone. The tail, in all its variations, was a masterpiece of form serving function. It balanced necks, powered movement, defended life, attracted mates, conveyed messages. It was a tool of survival and a brush of expression. And now, in fossil beds and labs and museums, it continues to teach. Each vertebra, like a note in a silent symphony, contributes to the larger song. So when we follow a tail through time, we're not just chasing anatomy, we're following the path of memory. We're tracing the motion that once passed beneath stars and across ancient grasslands. We're walking behind creatures who knew how to carry themselves with power, with precision, with poetry. And the fossil tail, though still, is never motionless. It arcs through thought. It sways through history. It hums. Let us now walk alongside the final curves of these tails, not as observers alone, but as participants in their story. Because the tail is not a relic of the past, it is a presence that lingers, a structure that lives on in shapes and systems across the tree of life. And in the silence of fossils, it offers not just evidence, but elegance. Each preserved tail, fossilized in ash or silt or stone, is a sentence still in motion, a question still turning its head gently in the direction of time. What does it mean that so many creatures, from the smallest lizards to the largest dinosaurs, carry tails? It means the tail is not excess, it is essence. It is stability when walking, grace when running, balance when leaping. It is communication without sound, power without violence, beauty without ornament. In the animal kingdom, the tail is an artist of motion. And when we study the fossils, when we align each vertebra with care and trace the muscle paths across ancient frames, we begin to understand not just what the tail did, but what it meant. In some species, the tail anchored lives too big to contain without it. The sheer weight of a sauropod neck demanded a counterpart, a reach of bone and sinew behind it that acted as an answer to gravity's call. Without that extension, the animal would tip. But with it, the body was whole, balanced like a poem, where every word leans on the one before it and guides the one that follows. The tail was punctuation in the language of life. There is a fossil of a sauropod tail where each vertebra is preserved in perfect sequence, curving gently through rock as if it had only just moved. It does not look ancient, it looks alive. The bones are aligned in a slow arc, graceful, quiet, complete. You can almost imagine the tail swaying in rhythm to a walk so large and slow it made the ground tremble. You can almost hear it, not as a sound, but as a feeling in the chest, like the pulse of the earth itself. And when extinction came, as it must, these tails lay down. They rested. Their motion stopped. But their stories did not. Over time, the soft tissues vanished, but the bones remained, soaked in minerals, wrapped in layers of sediment, slowly turned from structure into symbol. And now, when we find them, we do not just reconstruct skeletons. We remember rhythms. We trace the path of motion that once moved like music across the land. In the lab, paleontologists study these tails with reverence. They measure the spacing between vertebrae. They scan the cavities for signs of ligaments. They test flexion with digital models. They do not do this for spectacle. They do it for truth. Because within that truth is a kind of tenderness. The idea that even something as seemingly mundane as a tail was part of something miraculous. There are children today who see a mounted tail in a museum and feel wonder awaken. They trace the length of it with their eyes. They imagine what it would have looked like, swinging, guiding, signaling. That moment of imagining is part of the fossil's afterlife. It is the continuation of a movement that once existed in muscle and now exists in mind. Even in modern animals, the tail persists as a tool and a song. Cats use them to balance on ledges. Kangaroos use them as tripods. Monkeys wrap them around branches. Birds fan them in flight. Fish carve the water with them. The line that began in the ancient reptiles stretches forward, unbroken, still writing. We are surrounded by tails, and though ours has shortened and fused into memory, the evolutionary music still echoes through us. And perhaps that is why fossil tales move us in ways we cannot explain. Because they remind us that even the parts we think of as behind or beneath or forgotten were vital. The tale was never an afterthought. It was the quiet genius of nature's engineering, a thing that carried so much without ever asking for attention, a part that bore the weight so the rest could reach forward. In a way, the tale is a symbol of continuity, of what follows us, supports us, steadies us. And in the fossils, it becomes a message that even what lies behind can carry beauty, that even what no longer moves can still inspire movement in us, that every arc has a story and every curve was once carved by breath. So next time you stand before a fossil tale, let yourself follow it, not with footsteps, but with feeling. Trace it backward through time, through function, through gesture. Let it remind you that grace is often found in what we overlook, that strength can be silent, that purpose can be soft. The tale, in all its ancient variations, teaches us something simple and profound, that to move well, to live balanced, to stand with poise in a world full of shifting winds and heavy moments, we all need something behind us to carry the weight. Something flexible, resilient, grounded, something that remembers where we've been even as we look ahead. And maybe that is why, in the stillness of stone, the tale still sings. It sings of motion, of memory, of the music made by creatures whose bones have long gone silent, but whose rhythm carries on in every step we take toward understanding. Long before hands held brushes and chisels, before field notes and plaster jackets, before even the first fossil was named or studied, there was water. Gentle, flowing, persistent water. It touched everything, stone, root, shell, bone, and through its movement, it became the quiet archivist of deep time. In ancient riverbeds, on the floors of vanished lakes, across plains where rain fell soft and long, water did what no mind could plan. It preserved. It wrapped the past in sediment, sealed it in silt, carried stories from one place to another. Fossils, those hardened echoes of life, are not just shaped by death. They are shaped by water's long, slow breath. Imagine a dinosaur dying near a riverbank, its body crumpling into earth softened by recent rain. Insects come, scavengers pass, but soon the water rises, gently covering the bones. With each flood, silt drifts in and settles. Grain by grain, the skeleton disappears, not into forgetfulness, but into protection. Layers stack like pages. The air fades. Time begins its long work. Water continues to move through it all, sometimes seeping in with minerals, sometimes pressing down with the quiet weight of lakes or buried seas. It is this water, not violence, not fire, that holds the bones long enough for us to one day find them. Paleontologists know this rhythm. They study the layers not only for what they hold, but for how they were laid. Each stratum, each seam of shale or band of sandstone, speaks of a different water, a storm surge, a river's bend, a floodplain's hush. Some bones are twisted by torrents, some cradled in calm. And in this variety, we see how water didn't just bury the dead, it shaped their afterlife. A bone's position, its color, its hardness, even the angle of its break, these are all the voice of water, whispering what it did and how. In the Morrison Formation of North America, where Jurassic bones sleep beneath scrub and grass, scientists have traced how seasonal rains sculpted fossil beds. Dry seasons left bones exposed, etched by wind. Then the rains would come, short, heavy, rushing across ground too dry to hold them. The bones would shift, settle, crack. Some were carried far from where the animal fell, others were locked in place, gently entombed. The fossils we find today are mosaics of this movement, life paused not in a moment, but in a process. There are places where fossils are found in lake beds so still, so fine-grained, that even the thinnest bones remain intact. Here, water was not violent. It was slow. It layered clay like silence, curling around each rib and digit with patience. These fossils look as if they might rise and walk away, If only they could shake off the weight of time. Their preservation is so perfect, you can see the lines of skin, the shape of lungs, sometimes even the shadow of a final breath. But even after burial, water continues its work. Groundwater seeps in, carrying minerals, iron, calcite, silica. These minerals fill the pores of bone, replacing organic matter molecule by molecule. This process, called permineralization, does not destroy, it transforms. The bone is no longer bone, but it holds the same shape, the same curve, the same story. And the minerals that fill it can color the fossil, deep red from iron, pale yellow from sulfur, black from manganese, each hue a trace of the water that passed through. In some fossils, you can see water's fingerprint more directly. Raindrop impressions frozen in mud beside a trackway, ripple marks held in stone where a pond once was. Even fossilized puddles, tiny basins where a footstep held water long enough to shape the sediment. These are not grand, not dramatic. But they are moments. They are weather made permanent, time slowed into sculpture. And water does more than preserve. It reveals. As cliffs erode, rivers carve new paths, and rains wash away sediment, fossils long buried are brought to light. This is not violence. It is reintroduction. The earth, turning through its quiet cycles, lifts the past to the present. A bone falls from a hillside. A tooth glints in a dry creek. A paleontologist, walking with quiet hope, finds something not new, but returned. This is how most fossils are found, not dug for, but noticed, made visible again by water's slow unfolding. Even in the lab, after excavation, water continues to play its role. Fossils are soaked to loosen matrix. They are cleaned with water, hardened with liquid adhesives. They are photographed wet to enhance contrast. The same substance that began their preservation helps reveal them to human eyes. We do not fight water, we follow its path. In the natural world, water means change. It carves, flows, dissolves, renews. But in paleontology, it also means memory. It holds shape. It keeps contour. It wraps the fragile in mineral threads and seals it from decay. It does not keep everything. Many lives vanish without trace. But what it keeps with care. So when we look at a fossil, we are looking at the work of water as much as bone. We are seeing what remained, not because it was strongest, but because it was cradled. And that changes how we understand the past, not as a story of destruction, but of preservation. Not of sudden ends, but of slow becoming. A shell did not fossilize because it was tough. It fossilized because the water was calm. A skeleton did not survive by accident. It survived by being touched, softly, repeatedly, patiently, by time's most gentle sculptor. The next time rain falls, listen closely. Each drop is a word, each rivulet a sentence. The ground is being written upon, and somewhere, far beneath, something that once breathed is being turned into memory, slowly, beautifully, one layer at a time. Let's drift further now, not just into the bones beneath the soil, but into the water itself, into the way it moved, the way it pooled and dried, flooded and retreated. Because water is not just a background to the story of fossils, it is the quiet author of their survival. Its movements, its chemistry, its pressure and silence all leave fingerprints behind, not just on stone, but inside it. And when we study fossils today, we are often studying water's memory more than the organism's own. In regions like the Green River Formation in North America, ancient lakes held such stillness that they preserved entire fish, leaves, insects, even the soft flutter of wings. Fossils from this place are not shattered or scattered. They are complete, laid flat as if gently pressed between pages of time. Scientists believe these lakes were anoxic at the bottom, low in oxygen, low in life, low in decay. Creatures that sank were not consumed. They were embraced, and the silt, fine as flour, settled around them like a closing eye. Each year added a layer. Each season wrote another line. And over millions of years, these layers thickened into stone, into pages we now turn with care. In contrast, Some fossils come from floodplains, places where water rushed and deposited chaos. Here, bones are jumbled, overlapping, fractured. A leg beside a jaw, a rib pressed into a hip. These are not peaceful deaths. They are moments of sudden change. Storms, stampedes, flash floods. The animals were caught in transition, and water sealed them where they fell. In these fossils, the story is not of sleep, but of interruption. And yet even here, water preserved. Even here, it paused the moment and held it close. Groundwater adds another layer to this tale. As it seeps through rock, it carries dissolved minerals. And when it encounters buried bone, it begins a quiet exchange. Over time, water replaces what once was soft and living with what is stable and crystalline. Calcium phosphate becomes quartz. Collagen becomes iron oxide. A fossil is not a bone turned to stone. It is a bone rewritten in stone's language. And the author of that rewrite is water. The minerals vary depending on the environment. In areas rich in iron, fossils turn red or orange. In volcanic regions, they may carry traces of ash and silica, gleaming faintly in light. Some are black, some pale gray. Some sparkle when split open. These colors aren't cosmetic. They are part of the fossil's history. They tell us about the kind of water that passed through, about the chemistry of ancient soil, about the presence of volcanic activity or salt or pressure. They are maps of the unseen. And yet, despite its preserving nature, water can also erode. Fossils found in riverbanks are sometimes half lost, their edges worn smooth by centuries of trickling motion. Some bones are pocked, flaked, brittle. These are fossils that were almost forgotten. Their shapes are incomplete, their surfaces faded. But even in this, there is beauty, because what remains is what mattered most, what was dense enough, hidden just enough, or lucky enough to hold on through change. In some places, entire fossil beds are built on the rhythm of water's rise and fall. One example is the Dinosaur Provincial Park in Alberta, Canada. Here, fossil layers are stacked like the memory of seasons, each one marked by different sediment, different water patterns. Some layers hold flood debris, others quiet lagoon mud. Some contain dozens of species, others only one. By reading the water's history, paleontologists begin to understand the ecosystem itself, not just what lived, but what the land looked like, how it moved, how it responded to storm and drought. Fossils of fish often preserve the finest details because they are usually fossilized in calm aquatic settings. Their scales, their gills, even the outline of soft tissue remain visible. This is not just chance. It is the result of water so still, so mineral-rich, so gentle, that even the thinnest parts of life are caught and held. These fossils are not spectacular in size, but they are breathtaking in intimacy. They show us what it means for time to be kind. And sometimes, water brings the past back in other ways. After heavy rains, new fossils are uncovered. The runoff cuts into cliffs, peels away sand, exposes bones that have slept beneath the surface for millennia. These moments are not dramatic. They often happen in silence, unnoticed. A tooth gleams after a storm. A bone rolls gently into a ravine. A shape appears where before there was only rock. This is how nature reveals, through slow erosion, through gentle insistence. Some of the most delicate fossils come from nodules, round stones that look solid but contain hidden worlds inside. Split one open and you might find a trilobite, a fern, even the body of a small marine creature. These nodules form when water-rich minerals seep into decaying matter, hardening around it before decomposition is complete. They seal the shape, the fold, the texture, and long after the soft parts are gone, the stone remembers their form. In museums, fossils are often displayed dry and clean, but in the field, they are almost always discovered with water, smeared with mud, damp with dew, rinsed in stream beds. Paleontologists carry spray bottles, not just to cool the stone, but to reveal contrast, to see patterns more clearly. A bit of moisture helps the fossil speak. It darkens the matrix, makes details emerge. Even here, Water is the translator. It is easy to forget that every fossil was once part of a living, breathing being. But water doesn't forget. It holds the shape. It carries the memory. It weaves the past into the present, not with force, but with patience. And in doing so, it becomes a kind of guardian, not of the living, but of the once living, not of the moment, but of what the moment left behind. So next time you hold a fossil, imagine the water that touched it, the rain that fell near its resting place, the underground river that flowed past it, the mineral-rich drop that entered its core. That water wrote part of the story you're holding now, not with words, but with presence, with movement, with care. Let us now drift to the last part of this watery story, where fossils no longer lie buried, but rest in human hands, on shelves, in drawers, in quiet displays under soft lights. Even here, in stillness, the memory of water remains. These bones and shells and leaf prints are not dry history. They are echoes of rivers, of rainstorms, of seas that once sang over the land. Water touched each one, not once, but again and again, moving around them, through them, past them. And though the water is gone, the shapes it left behind are still speaking. In the lab, fossils often arrive with soil still clinging to their edges. Technicians wash them gently, sometimes with brushes dipped in water, sometimes with sprays so fine they are like breath. They do not scrub, they coax, because each surface tells a story, and that story was written in sediment, a language formed not of letters, but of pressure and time and flow. A line along a rib might mark where silt settled heavier. A polish on a tooth might show where water brushed it smooth. These are not imperfections. They are part of the fossil's memory. And even in their mineralized forms, fossils can still absorb moisture. Some are delicate, reacting to humidity. Others are stable, but change color slightly when damp. Conservators monitor this constantly, because too much moisture can awaken not only minerals, but mold. Even here, water must be balanced. It must be welcomed with care, controlled, understood, just as it was in nature. Some fossils are made entirely of what water left behind. Petrified wood, for example, is not wood at all, but stone that remembers wood. As groundwater moved through buried trunks, it replaced each cell with silica, not quickly, not loudly, but slowly, over centuries. The result is a perfect mirror, a tree made of quartz, still showing its rings, its knots, even its bark. These fossils are among the most beautiful. Their colors shimmer under sunlight, reds, greens, blues, soft grays. They are what happens when water stops the clock and lets detail last forever. In other fossils, water wrote with pressure. In coal beds, ferns and leaves were pressed into shale so delicately that even their veins remain visible. These impressions, often no thicker than a whisper, speak of calm moments, when a leaf fell gently into mud, when a breeze dropped a seed. They were covered quickly, sealed beneath water and soil, and though the plant itself is long vanished, its outline persists. A fossil not of the thing, but of its trace. A memory held in absence. And sometimes, the most profound fossils are those that never became stone at all, but remain trapped in water's cousin, amber. Tree resin hardened by time. Amber is not bone. It is the echo of sap. But inside it, we find feathers, skin, even breath bubbles. Drops of water, sealed beside an insect or a petal, glisten with the same clarity they had 100 million years ago. These droplets are literal memories, water that never joined the sea or sky again, because it stayed behind to witness. There is poetry in that pause, in the idea that a drop of rain could become a fossil's companion, that it could sit beside a creature for eternity, small and unnoticed, until someone, somewhere, looked close enough to see it. These are the kinds of fossils that don't shout. They whisper. They hum with time. And now, in museums and classrooms, water continues to guide our understanding. Fossils are studied under microscopes that use water-based lenses. Chemical analyses use liquids to reveal composition. Even the story of fossil formation is taught using models of sediment flowing through clear tanks, watching how layers build, how pressure changes, how something once soft becomes part of the Earth's memory. We often speak of fire as a force of transformation, but it is water that has done the quieter work. It has preserved more life than any flame. It has turned decay into structure, fragility into endurance. It has washed away what was temporary and left behind what could speak for the ages. Water, in its slow insistence, made history visible. And perhaps that's why so many people feel something quiet when they touch a fossil. Not excitement, but stillness. It's not just the age they sense, it's the softness of its becoming. The knowledge that this shape, this texture, this presence was not preserved in violence or suddenness, but through patience, through the work of waves and storms and groundwater, through the long, steady hand of nature's most tender sculptor. To walk in a place where fossils lie close to the surface is to walk beside ancient water. You may not see it, but it was there. It carried the pieces. It pressed them into earth. It wrote their shapes into stone. And the earth, quiet and constant, kept them safe, until now. So let the next raindrop that touches your hand remind you, not just of weather, but of history. Not just of now, but of then. That drop may fall on your skin and vanish, but it is part of a lineage of drops, a procession of motion that shaped continents, carved valleys, and sealed the bones of giants beneath the soil. Water has always remembered what we might forget, and in fossils, it continues to speak. The story of fossils is the story of water, of its patience, its presence, its power to hold the shape of what came before. It is a story not just of bone, but of flow, not just of death, but of the long, soft work of time. And in every fossil, no matter how small, that story is still being told, quietly, beautifully, one layer at a time. Beneath the silence of stone, some fossils carry stories not just of death, but of healing. They are not perfect. They are marked, scarred, broken, and then repaired. A crack that fused again, a rib that healed crooked, a tooth regrown beside an empty socket. These are not signs of failure. They are signs of survival, and in the world of deep time, they are rare and sacred, because they show us something even more precious than life: resilience. In these fossils, we do not find the moment life ended. We find the moments it endured. Imagine a bone split by a fall, by a predator's bite, or by the weight of another in a crowded herd. The creature limped, bled, hid, but it did not die. Slowly, cell by cell, its body began the quiet work of repair. New bone grew, not as smooth as before, but strong enough to hold. In time, the animal walked again, ran again, maybe even fought again. And then, years later, it died, not from the injury, but from age or chance. Its skeleton sank into the earth, and the broken place, now healed, became part of the fossil. A memory of pain overcome. Paleontologists call these signs of healing pathologies. But they are more than just abnormalities. They are messages from within the bone. A fused joint might mean arthritis. A swollen edge might show infection. A puncture wound that sealed over speaks of violence survived. And these signs are not common. Most fossils are fragments, scattered or crushed. To find one that not only preserves damage, but also the body's answer to that damage, is to find a conversation between injury and endurance. Some of the clearest examples come from theropods, predatory dinosaurs like Allosaurus and Tyrannosaurus. Their skeletons often show bite marks, bone breaks, even gouges made by the teeth of rivals or prey. In one remarkable fossil, a Tyrannosaurus skull bears the deep puncture of another's tooth, clean through the jaw. But around the wound, new bone had grown. The creature had lived for months, maybe years, after the attack. It hunted with pain. It roared with a crooked face. It adapted. In another fossil, the tail of a hadrosaur shows several vertebrae fused together, likely from a fracture that healed imperfectly. The dinosaur lived on, though its gait may have changed, its balance adjusted. We do not know if it limped, but we know it moved. The fusion is not smooth, but rugged, a patchwork of survival. The bone did not need to be pretty, it needed only to endure. Sometimes, healing leaves traces even in teeth. In a ceratopsian skull, paleontologists found a shattered horn base, cracked from impact, perhaps during combat with another horned dinosaur. But the edges were rounded, not sharp. The break had healed. The horn had continued to grow. Whatever pain came with it, the animal had carried it until the end. These stories remind us that ancient creatures were not perfect machines. They lived in a world full of danger, not just from predators, but from falls, infections, sickness. And yet their bodies, like ours, were built to recover. Not always, not completely, but often enough that the record remains, locked in fossil form. A broken rib is not a flaw. It is a page in a longer book. In some fossils, we see signs of disease, bone thickened unevenly, joints inflamed, evidence of tumors, of degeneration. A dinosaur lived with cancer, another with osteoporosis. These are not guesses. CT scans show them clearly. Abnormal densities, twisted growths, shadows of pain. But still, these creatures walked, fed, nested, survived. The fossil is not the story of their end. It is the story of their effort. And not all repairs were physical. In trackways preserved in mudstone, we find paths where one foot drags slightly, or where steps are uneven. These could be signs of injury, of favoring a hurt leg. But the tracks continue. They show forward motion. An animal in discomfort, still moving through its world, still searching for food, for shelter, for place. The ground recorded that perseverance, and the rock remembered it. Fossils with signs of healing are deeply human in the feelings they stir. Because they show vulnerability, they show suffering. But more than that, they show persistence. A dinosaur did not pause to consider whether to recover. It simply did. The bone grew back. The joint adapted. The body shifted around what had changed. That quiet determination, that biological courage, is etched into the fossil like a whisper. I lived, even after. In museums, these fossils sometimes go unnoticed. Visitors admire the large teeth, the tall spines, the claws. But they miss the small bulge on a rib, the misaligned vertebrae, the dent in the skull that shouldn't be there. Yet these are the places where the real story lies. Not in the predator's roar, but in its silence afterward. Not in the kill, but in the limp that followed. Not in the dramatic end, but in the soft middle, the part where the creature chose to go on. And that choice, though not conscious, is meaningful, because it connects us. We, too, heal. We, too, carry scars. We limp, we adapt, we continue. The fossil is not just ancient bone, it is a mirror, and when we look into it, we see not only a creature, but a truth, that pain is part of life, but so is the body's answer to it, so is repair. So next time you see a fossil, look closer, not for the perfection, but for the flaw, the crack that sealed, the bone that bent and held, the roar that came after the wound, because those are the stories that last. Those are the stories worth listening to. Now, let us step deeper into the landscape of broken things, into the quiet courage of ancient bodies that did not shatter, but bent, healed, and moved forward. Because fossils with signs of trauma are not only evidence of injury, they are chapters in the hidden history of endurance. These are not just bones. They are biographies of survival written in calcium and stone. Each healed fracture, each fused joint, each uneven regrowth is not just a mark of damage. It is a monument to persistence. In the dry fossil beds of Mongolia, one velociraptor specimen was found with a fractured metatarsal, the long bone of the foot. The break had healed before death, though not perfectly. The toe likely never functioned the same way again. And yet, the animal lived. It continued to hunt or scavenge, continued to climb and run. The fossil doesn't show pain, but it shows adaptation. It shows what life did with what was left. Similar signs of survival are found in herbivorous dinosaurs as well. In iguanodon specimens, researchers have noted bone growth around joints suggestive of repeated strain or arthritis. These creatures, with their large size and heavy builds, likely placed immense pressure on their limbs. The changes in the bone structure don't speak of a moment, they speak of time, of a body that bore weight day after day, despite the discomfort. The wear became part of its shape. In some species, repeated injuries seemed common. Stegosaurus fossils have revealed multiple tail spikes with damage consistent with high-impact blows, sometimes even breakage, sometimes regrowth. These were not isolated incidents. They suggest that these animals used their tails frequently, perhaps in defense, perhaps in ritualized combat. And when the spikes cracked, they did not fall away. They healed. The body found a way to hold them together again. A dinosaur does not pause to mourn its damage. It simply becomes something slightly new, slightly different, slightly stronger. Even small fossils carry these tails. In the bones of early mammals, researchers have found dental infections, jaw abscesses, and cracked teeth worn down by continued use. These were not catastrophic injuries, but they were real. They hint at discomfort, at altered feeding behavior, at the body working around its limitations. These tiny mammals, long lost to time, limped forward into the dark with their flaws. They fed, they nested, they persisted. Sometimes the healing is so clear it becomes art. In one hadrosaur, a massive bite wound on the hip bone had not only begun to regrow, but had nearly closed by the time of death. The edges of the wound were smooth, the regrowth lumpy but organized. The predator had failed to kill. The prey had fled, injured but alive. And for months, maybe years, it carried that story in its bones. Until another end came, a quieter one perhaps. And now, that hip lies in a drawer or a display, whispering its message to anyone willing to look closely. I survived that day. There are fossils that confuse scientists at first, bones with odd bulges or distortions that seem inconsistent with the rest of the anatomy. But then the scans come in and the story sharpens. It was a break, a stress fracture, a twisted growth plate. The body had failed, then tried again. The fossil does not lie. It preserves the moment pain entered the story and the moment recovery followed it. In crocodilian fossils, similar healing patterns appear. Broken ribs with new growth, vertebrae with fused surfaces, even missing limbs that show signs of remodeling. These creatures, whose lineage stretches back alongside the dinosaurs, also carried the ability to repair. And through them, we see that healing is not rare. It is ancient. It is expected. It is part of the body's wisdom, written deeper than thought. Bird fossils show it too. A broken wing bone in a prehistoric seabird, carefully knit back together. A cracked beak. A healed ankle. These are not just injuries, they are acts of grace. Because they tell us that life, even fragile life, found a way to perch again, to fly again, to nest again. Even beyond vertebrates, healing appears. Trilobites with regrown spines, ammonites with cracked shells that sealed over, arthropods that lost limbs and regrew imperfect versions. Their fossils are smaller, their pain less obvious, but the pattern is the same. An injury is not the end. It is the beginning of a new chapter. Nature never promised perfection, but it does offer resilience. When paleontologists catalog these fossils, they mark the injury sites carefully. They measure regrowth. They model how the damage would have affected motion or behavior. But beyond the data, there is a feeling, a quiet respect. Because each of these fossils defies the idea that ancient life was brutal and short alone. It shows instead that recovery was part of the process. That even in a world of claws and teeth and sudden storms, there was time to heal. And when we see these fossils, we are reminded of something in ourselves. That pain is not final. That healing does not always mean returning to what was, but growing into what is now. That our own bones too carry signs of stress and strain, of breaks and recovery. That our own bodies tell stories of endurance every day. In this way, the fossil becomes more than a relic. It becomes a teacher, not of fear, but of strength, not of despair, but of effort. It says, you are not alone in your pain. Others have felt it. Others have carried it. And even though their time is gone, their scars remain, to remind you that healing is part of the natural order, that it is older than language, older than thought, older than grief. So the next time you touch a fossil or gaze into the arc of a rib that once broke and then mended, pause. Let yourself feel the time it took, the effort, the silence between the injury and the healing, because in that silence is the roar, not of dominance or fear, but of survival. A roar not shouted, but carried quietly, deep within the bone. Let us now arrive at the final stretch of this story, not at the point of breakage, but at the quiet moments that follow. Because all healing, ancient or modern, moves slowly. It does not arrive with noise or certainty. It gathers in the silence, builds beneath the surface, and then one day becomes part of the form. In fossils, this truth endures. A crack becomes curve. A splinter becomes strength. What once threatened to end a life becomes part of how that life is remembered.